We're in Brussels for ETC, and today I'm with Santiago.
Hi.
Hi. How is Brussels for you so far?
Really interesting. I always enjoy conferences, even though I tell people I don't like coming to conferences, but it's a great time to meet with people and portfolio companies. So yeah, it's very productive.
Are you based close here?
Yes, I'm based in Monaco.
Okay, so it was an easy flight.
Yeah, it was fairly easy. I mean, I've never actually been to Brussels. It is a bit unsafe, I guess. It's a great, beautiful city.
It's good to discover a new city.
Yeah.
I want to start from the beginning. So tell us how you got into the industry.
Sure. I was investment banking right out of college, and I stumbled on the white paper. I had the benefit of having studied game theory. And so the Nakamoto consensus was like a really big breakthrough in optimizing payoffs. People talk about prisoner's dilemma, and anytime there's a coordination problem, like the Byzantium's general problem was like something that I'd studied in school. And so it was an interesting journey. I reached out to my professors and I said, hey, well, have you read this white paper? It's like it's pretty groundbreaking. And they're like, oh yeah, we've heard about this thing called Bitcoin. It's Silk Road. It's used for drugs. It's like illicit activity. And they really dismissed it.
Where did you study?
BU, Boston.
Okay.
And over the years, I've learned that anytime someone has a knee-jerk reaction to dismissing something, pay attention to that. Because that's where a lot of the innovation happens. Like if you look at throughout history, like how the major breakthroughs in technology have happened, major discoveries in the world, from explorers discovering a new continent to penicillin, a lot of time it happens by accident, and a lot of time it happens by people that are not in the industry. And so a lot of times the old guard, especially in academia, they're very dismissive of new concepts. And so for me, that was I paid more attention to that. And that's, if there's one takeaway in this interview, it's really that. And crypto's, even now, it's still one of those industries where you walk around and it's sometimes uncomfortable to tell people that you're in crypto, because they have, when you think about crypto, it's one of those industries that a lot of people have very strong opinions about crypto, but they don't necessarily take the time to learn. Even though you can use crypto applications, which has something that is really kind of taken off over the last couple of years. Yeah. But people have very strong reactions to crypto. They may have not truly appreciated it. And I think if you look to the internet, it was also like that. Unfortunately or fortunately, crypto has this problem where you have a constant price discovery on things. Like there's a constant price feed to things. Yeah. So anytime crypto does a 10x, people are really excited. You're the most popular person at an event. Anytime crypto goes down 80% and you're the least popular person. And so price is in many ways important, but it's a distraction. Because sometimes you don't pay as much attention to the more fundamental things. So it's nice to come to these conferences, because I think a lot of times talking to founders, it gives you a really true appreciation of how the future is going to unfold.
Yeah, we'll come back to that, but I'll take you back to you're at uni and you're talking with your professor and he dismisses this. And what do you think?
Well, I was at JP Morgan at the time in investment banking, so I was already out of college. And mind you, this was when Jamie Dimon still calls it, is not very much of a believer in crypto. Certainly back then in 2012, it was taboo, and you couldn't even whisper the word Bitcoin in the elevator. But having worked in finance, I think, and doing, at the time I was in the investment bank, and so you're doing cross-border deals, you have a true appreciation of how broken the financial system is. It's just antiquated. Yeah. It doesn't work like the internet. So like if you contrast all your experiences in the internet, so say you're shopping on Amazon, you're using internet services, they work exceptionally well. Your smartphone, think about the transformation. I'm in my early 30s. We didn't have a smartphone when I was growing up. And you see that evolution of how music industry was transformed, how consumption of media is transformed, all the services that are available in your smartphone. But there's one particular industry that has resisted and has not really innovated. And the quality of service that you get in finance, at least in most of the world, is very suboptimal, very subpar. And so this idea of like you're buying a stock and it settles in 3 days, you don't really know your counterparty. Anytime you deposit money in a bank, you don't understand like how that money's being used. Whether people are aware of those issues or not, I think you become more acutely aware of how inefficient the financial system is on a global scale when you travel.
Do you think change in this industry is slow because people lack information or less educated around money?
I just think crypto hasn't been very relatable for many people. Because if you're in a Western developed country, you may think that there's nothing wrong with your bank. There's nothing wrong. You can use your credit card anywhere. It's very easy. A lot of times you try to convince people Bitcoin is something that they should get interested in. They're like, why would I hold something that's incredibly volatile and difficult? And so, it's, unless you're in a country like Venezuela or in a hyperinflating country where Bitcoin becomes a much more compelling reason, then there's really no need for Bitcoin in the developed world. Now, for most people, I would say, like Bitcoin, the idea of selling Bitcoin to people, getting people interested, is a little bit like flood insurance. Most people don't buy flood insurance until your house gets flooded once. And so it's very difficult. But so I think crypto, like most technology, doesn't become interesting unless it's very relatable for people. And I think that's what's most interesting about crypto now, is that it becomes very relatable. Like for collectors, well, there's digital art, and you appreciate the benefits of something like an NFT. You have provenance on the blockchain, so you can very clearly know where it's coming from and that the artist, is actually producing it. There's also beautiful pieces of work that are digital, so you can understand the scarcity component of that. But even DeFi is, most people don't like to think about finance, don't like to, they're normally not checking their bank account 23 times a day.
It's a psychological thing, so, emotional relation to money. I think like there is something in between the ones that are comfortable with the technology and adopt it, and the ones that really needed, the extreme case of Venezuela. There's something in the middle that I've seen, which is countries where the government has exploited people to a point where taxes don't even make sense, like the way everything works. And people have been the past years trying to transact it with cash, which is not very practical. What I'm thinking here specifically, some countries in Europe where I see this happening. So I think there is room, like if there's enough pressure and if there's enough collective, because these countries tend to work collectively, I think there is room for like a shift to happen suddenly if the industry allows.
Historically, the narrative around the more hardcore kind of crypto anarchists, let's call it that, is that crypto was going to blow up the traditional world and systems. I think to your point, there's been a degrading trust in institutions, whether it's newspapers, media, governments. There's a frustration. Why? Because we've learned time and time again, anytime there is centralization, that power gets abused, and then you betray your constituents. And then there's some sort of revolution that needs to happen to restore some, at least temporarily, some sort of order. And so, yes, I mean, I wanted to impart something. I am much more excited about crypto now. I think I'm earlier now than it was in 2012. Because finally you see a line of path into how it fits very squarely into a lot of the more fundamental problems that we're having. Problems and opportunities, I would say. Challenges, let's call it that, of our generation. When you think about AI and the importance of having the understanding of the provenance of the data, of how that data is being used, of how the model is behaving, having certain cryptographic proofs of how a model is outputting information, the more and more we rely on AI agents, the more important it will become to use crypto for a wide variety of whether it's homomorphic encryption or having proof of humanity by signing with cryptographic keys, or having AI agents use stablecoins. And also think about a prediction market. That in and of itself becomes a far better signal of sentiment, of news, than CNN. Just because markets are arbiters of truth because there's value on the line. So when you think about like what Taleb describes as having skin in the game, people, we're having a conversation. We can say a lot of things here, but if there's no value that is being transacted, then there's not a lot of stake. There's not, certainly you can stake your reputation. I could say some crazy stuffs here and then my reputation gets hurt. But markets are really good because they provide truth. They surface truth. About a particular company, about a particular country, about risk in general, and social consensus and perception. And so like something like a prediction market is now becoming incredibly useful and interesting for the US elections. Right? And I think it's become a primary source of news, and now people are referencing something like Polymarket. And so that's just one example where anytime you reduce friction in allowing people to coordinate and transact value. Like that fundamentally, crypto is so interesting because, and at the same time, very generalized, like the internet, because the internet allowed you to move information at the speed of light. And humans were social species, so we want to communicate, we want to interact with other people. And so the internet, and like other pieces of technology throughout history, the most groundbreaking pieces of technology have allowed us to become better at coordinating as social species. Language, written language, the typewriter, radio, the television, the internet, and then crypto. So expands what the internet allowed you to do with information, but with value. Yeah. And anytime you introduce value to information, it just exponentiates the impact that the internet has at that distribution, at that scale. And so, but to your point, it's been difficult to explain. I don't know. I mean, you were mentioning that your mom got into crypto quite early. You got in 2017. I don't know for you, it's been challenging even for me to convince people why this matters. I
think with everything I do, I believe in meritocracy. I think when something is good enough, people come.
Sure.
And I think this industry sees that when there's something exciting enough, when there's money involved, there's the fundamentals, how people behave, right? And the motivators. So I do think that once everything is in place, people will move and come. We had a guest earlier today that talked about crypto not being a vertical, but being horizontal, which I also believe. I think similar to AI, there's technology that can be layered over and improve things all across. How do you see this playing out? So in an ideal world where everyone is using crypto or using Web3, it's implemented everywhere, we don't feel it, maybe it's just part of day-to-day. What is the key impact it is going to have on just common person's life?
Exponential, because there is a lot of, think about, again, in your day-to-day interactions. As an investor that I am, anytime you see friction, then that is an opportunity. And anytime you remove friction from a system, it unlocks nonlinear consumer behavior. So think about e-commerce. Now, instead of you going once a week to the supermarket or to your local hardware store or to the shopping mall, you're at the you can buy 24/7, 365, anything across the world. Your access to services is not constrained to a local jurisdiction. It's everywhere. And that has been exponential for consumption, and stimulating demand across industries or craftsmen or whatever, and businesses everywhere. And it increases competition. And so crypto, again, finance is still very localized. And DeFi, for instance, is a global financial market, untethered, unconstrained. And that is exponential, right? So you talk to financial institutions, a lot of banks can't service a big part of the population because it's not very economical for them. Because unless you deposit at least 1,000 euros into a bank account, they can't recoup their cost on that because they need to do KYC checks. There's a whole cost on operations and compliance that needs to go into onboarding a new customer. So what happens is a huge part of the pyramid doesn't have access to financial services. And it's not to say collectively they're a huge market, but at the unit economic level, they're not very profitable for these institutions. Now, you layer on top of that crypto, which allows you to do things far, far more efficiently. So in my time at talking to a lot of financial institutions, a lot of them will tell you, we love blockchain technology. The idea of having everything in a permissionless, open, transparent ledger where you can see all the transactions, you can verify these things atomically, that streamlines their back office, their compliance. So for them, the cost just goes down an order of magnitude. And so their business can grow 10x, maybe even more. So I think that's the kind of impact that crypto has on, at least on finance, even for creators, right? Think about, for instance, if you're an artist, if you're not in New York, Lisbon, Paris, it becomes very difficult for you to be discovered. However, the two biggest artists of our generation, Taylor Swift and Justin Bieber, guess where they were discovered?
On the street.
YouTube.
Oh, YouTube.
Because that's the impact that that type of technology has. Why? Because it has Somewhere, some manager in Nashville, Tennessee saw that video on YouTube and didn't have to be where Taylor Swift was in Philadelphia before she moved to Nashville. But that manager could see that video on YouTube, and because he was able to see that, reached out to her and signed her up. And now Taylor Swift is Taylor Swift. And so that's the kind of impact that you have when you have global reach and distribution. The internet has been transformational to everything that we do. And I think in a similar manner, crypto will come in and become that horizontal stack of the internet that allows us to transmit value. And then that, of course, we're now thinking about existing use cases of how you can improve a bank, right? Of how you can improve the financial system. But there's so many use cases that we haven't even thought about, but will be created by some folks here at these conferences. In the same way that no one really imagined all the different applications that you would have on your smartphone. And so it's a bit of a cop-out answer because it's difficult for me to tell you what those applications will be. If I knew, I'd be building it. But as an investor, it's hard for me to not believe that will happen, because over the last decade, I continue to see really smart and talented founders come into the space. And it's not easy to build in crypto. It has regulatory risk, it has reputation risk, it has career risk still. But I would never short human capital. And I think we continue, like the caliber of developers, not just developers, but just human capital in this industry, it sort of captivated our generation of builders. And so, you talk to some of the best founders that I backed, they're incredibly successful. They built Web2 companies, but they decided to come to crypto because philosophically they really believe in how this technology can transform. They sympathize with the problems that Web2 has. And so they're like, we actually, for AI, for instance, what I'm trying to say is smart people want to work with smart people and want to build on and fix hard problems. I think the world has certain hard problems that need to be fixed. And I think smart people understand that crypto fits squarely into that equation of how to fix some of these problems.
What most of us believe, I guess, working in the industry, like obviously that everything will go right. What could go wrong?
That's a great question. I think a lot of things can go wrong. So if you think about historically, that we talk a lot about like external factors like influencing crypto, but I think a lot of damage has been done internally within the industry. I think we can be better at not trying to replicate or not trying to reinvent a lot of things or everything. There are some things in the traditional world that work very well. And I'm a big believer that sensible regulation will make crypto far, far better. And there are some contingents within crypto that are very radical and extreme. And I'm of the mind that like if crypto is really going to go mainstream, we need to fix, asymmetries of information. We need to fix, just the way, security is still a big issue, right? The number of hacks that happen. And it's just sort of chaotic, right? You have innovation at the smart contracting layer. You're pushing code. Things break in crypto and it's not like you call, you can fix it. There's a lot of, so I think, what FTX unfortunately set us back as an industry, I think we've recovered from that. I think we're much better now in a much better place today. There's a lot that we can learn, and how do we prevent something like that happening again? And I think that fits squarely in the industry, because I don't think it's feasible or reasonable to assume that this industry is going to realize its potential if we continue to have, if we expect the normal user to be very sophisticated in understanding security. And I think that's probably the most important thing, right? Just making it incredibly easy for people to use while not compromising on security.
I think building with that in mind can be really helpful, because obviously like you being in charge of your own money, when people haven't historically, it sounds good at first, but then they don't know what to do with it. The responsibility, they just want to push it into someone else. Obviously, like it's very loud. I know you're not from the US, but like I'm sure you've been following like the elections could have an impact. Not thinking price wise, that's not how I look at the industry. So most of my questions are around expanding the industry or introducing new audiences to the industry. So like growing essentially. You think depending on how the elections go or independently, just the attention crypto has been getting here and there, do you think it will grow? Like what's what do you think the impact will be?
Before we started, if you were to tell me that we would have had an ETF and crypto being a central topic at a presidential debate or campaign level, I would have laughed out of the room, right? But here we are, and I think it's incredibly impactful. I don't think people really have truly absorbed that information and how groundbreaking it is. Like, I know 10 years is a lot, 12 years this industry's been around for. It's nothing really when you think about it. Like, this has become, again, scam, internet money used for illicit activity online, to a major recognized asset class that has an ETF. We'll continue to have more ETFs, and being a central topic in the election. Why? Because young people care about it. Yeah, and young people are very digitally native and savvy, and so crypto fits into that equation really easily. So yeah, I mean, I think regulation continues to be one of those things where we all want it. We've all asked for regulatory clarity. We haven't gotten it. And certainly other jurisdictions like, Abu Dhabi, Singapore, Hong Kong, like these places have been more pro regulation. But the clarity itself, like, let me ask you a question. You go talk to 10 banks right now. They all probably know about crypto. They all probably know how they can leverage this technology to streamline their operations. A lot of them are doing pilot programs to, settle tokenized stuff, but they're not doing it fully because, and guess what the number one reason is? The regulatory gray area for them continues to be a challenge. Yeah. I mean, we have MiCA here in Europe, and I think it's a step in the right direction. I don't think it's fully formed and fleshed yet, but I think, to your point, yeah, I think regulation, look, the music industry went through this as well. You had Napster, and then that got shut down, and now you have Spotify, and everyone uses Spotify, Apple Music.
In the music industry, one could say it's kind of broken.
Sure. I mean, look, it's not perfect. I guess Taylor Swift has strong opinions on the royalties that she can get versus other artists. The music industry had to, that transformation, I think, is useful and instructive for something like crypto, where you have, anytime you have really groundbreaking technology, it takes time for regulators to understand it, and you are displacing some incumbents, so there is resistance. But I think we'll get there. Hopefully we'll get there. And I think it sounds like, if you look at Polymarket, it would tell you that Trump will win the election. And at least he's been very much more pro crypto. And I think that is quite helpful for the industry.
It makes sense to slow down regulation because sudden change tends to not work well with crowds. In a way, it's good that it's slow so people have time to learn it and get used to it, and opens less room for more scams, I guess. What is exciting you at the moment? So as you look at the market, you're looking at investments. What is exciting?
Two areas, DePIN and AI, are incredibly exciting. It goes back to my original point. I think DePIN makes crypto incredibly relatable. So as an analogy, I know I'm doing a lot of analogies to the internet, and crypto is not perfect, but the internet was a transformational thing for the internet. The email was transformational for the internet and adoption. Because before email, people were go look at YouTube videos of like Bill Gates explaining why the internet was transformational in 2001, and he gets laughed on public television. He's like, the internet's gonna be explosive. Turn of the century, not long ago. Why? Because you were just coming off the .com crash, and people were dismissive. It was like, the internet's used for pictures of cats, and literally, like, you can't make this up. It's very, history definitely repeats itself. But the email made everyone want a personal computer at work and at home. And then that justified investments into CapEx to roll out better internet services, better hardware. And then you had the possibility to have a smartphone, and then the smartphone justified more investment into, broadband technology and chip technology, and then all the applications that are possible now, in a span of you're talking like 20-year span. And in a similar manner, I think DePIN. So when you have this type of very generalized horizontal technology, it's sometimes very difficult for people to understand how it's going to be used. It's not very relatable. And the question is, how does crypto impact my life? I think a lot of people are wondering that. With DePIN, you go to them and say, hey, here, use your same phone, but you can have a service called Helium, and it's going to be 50% cheaper than your carrier with better coverage, or at least the same coverage. Now, tell me why you wouldn't want to use that. A rational person, why wouldn't you switch? There's really no reason, right? And it's very tangible. So something like that makes crypto incredibly tangible. And we can talk here, stable coins are incredibly tangible for so many people. They are. But I think DePIN is that category where, because it touches the real world, it is a real service that is being provided. It makes crypto incredibly relatable for people. So once they start using Helium to earn a token, then the incentive to learn and get onboarded and really use this Web3 economy is there, right? That's the onboarding mechanism. Stablecoins have been doing that in a lot of countries, not perhaps here or in the US as much. But I'll tell you one thing, once someone uses a stablecoin, they don't want to go back to using a wire transfer. And I think DePIN will make crypto incredibly relatable for people because there are real services that are faster, better, cheaper, right? And so that will drive a lot of adoption. And it's just a new way to bootstrap networks that are like, think about physical infrastructure networks are incredibly capital intensive, like the hardware itself. But even Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin has convinced these people across the world to spend billions of dollars in ASIC chips to mine something called Bitcoin. Like, that's kind of crazy to think now. It still is in my mind. But that's the first example of a DePIN network, right? You convince people to buy ASICs, specialized hardware, to mine something called Bitcoin that they think has value. But you extend that to not something abstract of a digital store of value, digital gold, Bitcoin. It's a service. And people become owners of networks. And so it really is a new kind of way to, a new type of business model and disable it software as a service, really transform the internet. I won't go into all of that because I want to go to AI. I think there's no question AI is transformational. I think there's a lot of hype, but it is transformational. The smartest people that I know, are thinking about it. And where I think crypto fits into that equation is twofold. One, on the coordination side, and two, on imagine you're going to train a model. You're going to, use OpenAI or whatever. But a model with human feedback is far better. So say that you want to learn a new language, Romanian. Okay. So you can use a model that is you can go to OpenAI and just use your thing and try to learn Romanian, interact with a chatbot and whatever. Or you can use a model that has been trained with human feedback data attached to it. That model will be better than a model without human data. It's called reinforced human learning. And so when you have these systems, crypto is really good at coordination, getting humans to do something and incentivizing them to feed information. And so something like MyShell, or it's these companies that are just improving that coordination layer that allows people to share data, to train these models, and also have the verification piece attached to it, that the model's actually behaving in the way that you want it to, right? And having cryptographic proofs, and also proving that you're human.
Right.
How are you going to prove with deepfakes? Well, you can sign, right, with your private keys. And that's kind of central to making the distinction in a world where you can't really easily discern what is, AI and what is human. You can with cryptography. There's
so much that could go wrong with AI, but at the same time, I do see for me personally, the layover of Web3 and AI. Web3 could be the belt, for security, because you have transparency. You can see where information is going, where your data is going. If you have visibility, you feel more safe, even if it's still happening. There's many things that could be talked on the overlap, but that's one that I think makes a lot of sense.
I mean, blockchains are data rich, and they're pristine data that is immutable. And so over time, blockchains will be phenomenal training grounds to feed models that type of data that is untampered. And you have these guarantees that it's sort of immutable, right? And so you can then start thinking about, building better risk models, better credit scoring systems, with this type of data, right? The more that we use and interact on chain, the more data that is produced across a number of facets, the more footprint you have in a digital context, and you produce that immutable data, you can do some great stuff. Now to your point, NFTs are perfect cookies, and people really have a knee-jerk reaction to that, because if someone knows your wallet address, then they have a lot of insight and visibility into, I'm not asking you to show me your bank account. And so I think, obviously privacy is important, but blockchains as a whole are really interesting because they are producing a lot of data, and that data is quite valuable for training purposes and inference.
Anything exciting coming up on your business side, or maybe that you're working on?
Well, I'm an investor, so I'm constantly looking for smart, interesting people. Yeah, I think I'll leave you with just this thought that I think when we all join crypto, and I've talked to people that have joined super early, I've joined people that have joined just now, I think we're earlier now than any other moment in my trajectory in this industry, because finally you see a line of sight into how impactful it's going to be. Maybe in 2012, 14, 16, you had Bitcoin, you had a few other projects. It was very abstract. Yeah, the idea of digital gold is enticing. It was an $8 trillion asset class called gold. You can maybe displace that. I think my vision and thesis of how this is going to really impact and fit squarely into fixing a lot of the issues that need to be fixed. Like that thought, I have better visibility today than any other moment in my journey in crypto. I get the feeling that it will happen much faster. I'm prepared for it to take, another 10 years, totally possible. But it's hard for me to imagine. I think a lot of people share this feeling. It's like you open a door, you see the future. Yeah. And sometimes it is frustrating because you want to take normal people to come with you in that journey. But I think the only reason and the only way that's going to happen is if we continue to build incredibly good products and services, like consumer applications. And I don't think we're far from that state. It might be one killer app, it might be 2 or 3. I think it will be a number of them. But that's super exciting for me. To your point around price can be your best friend or your worst, because unfortunately we tend to focus too much on price, and there's a lot of noise into that. It's useful to come to these conferences to talk to founders and really understand kind of how the future will unfold. And I continue to invest in more and more so in applications. Probability of them really hitting mainstream is far greater than any other moment in time because the infrastructure is there. I think we can credibly support that type of usage, and so that's really exciting.
For everyone watching, how can they find you?
Santiago Roel. That's probably the best way.
Santiago, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, me. I really appreciate it.
Hey, what's up?
But it's not something Genzio is afraid of.
If you want to survive, you got to build a house.
No, we do not understand.
Ladies and gentlemen.
We're back at the Genzio Media House.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us today.